This is Space Cat's Peace Turtles, the unofficial podcast for Fantasy Flight's Twilight Imperium. Episode 109,
Sardakk N'Orr, Strategy Guide.
Music by Ben Prunty, featuring Matt Martins and Hunter Donaldson. Hunter, happy Tuesday. Are you having a good Tuesday?
How's
your Tuesday
great
looking?
Tuesday. This is a wonderful Tuesday. Nothing's up. Just a regular old Tuesday like y'all.
Things are going smooth. Everything's turning up Millhouse.
Easy.
This is just the easy peasy day that I always wanted out of a Tuesday. Glad to be getting this episode out on time with no issues.
Yeah, no issues. Anyways, let's just get into it. So Sardakk N'Orr.
How fitting that we had technological difficulties on the week of the Sardakk N'Orr strategy guide.
Yeah, people have pointed that out already. Just like, is this some
This
sort
is
of
not
like
us
meta
having
joke?
like a lark. This is not like us, having a laugh. This isn't a bit. This is, boy, did we have difficulty getting this one in the can. But
Right.
we're here now.
Well, hey, we upgraded your internet, and that's great.
Exactly. Yeah, now I can actually stream again. I've been completely unable to be a member of the stream team of SCPT, and we're back on track with that. And hopefully multiple other things will start to get a little bit better with my fancy new internet. But boy, it wasn't cooperating earlier this week at all, and that's what caused the delay. We're sorry that this one took a bit to get out, but we're here now, and hey, you know where else we're going to be? We're kind of excited. We haven't talked about this at all, and it's not even like a crazy announcement, but we're going to PAX Unplugged. It's just Hunter and I. We're not filming like a tournament game. I only know of, I think there's a tournament that happens at PAX, like a smaller scale. I mean, it's the same size as Gen Cons, I think, but I'm not as familiar with the people who run it. I think we're going to go check it out and just see the people that are there, but it's not as big of a to-do. We're not bringing the whole streaming team, but we wanted to check out PAX Unplugged and see what's going on there, and then who knows, maybe we can turn it into something in future PAX Unplugs that we start doing some cooler stuff at, but we kind of just don't even know the vibe of it and don't know what kind of stuff goes on there, so we're scouting it out a little, and we want to see you if you're there.
Yeah. Please hit us up if you are going to be at PAX Unplugged. I feel like we have no real plan for it, like what we're going to do. So if there are people that get a little annoyed that at Gen Con it seems like we're like completely stacked with stuff, because we are every Gen Con, or I mean, I'm saying this like we've been to a million of them. We've been to two.
The past two, yeah.
But both times we were like completely busy the entire time. We have a very open schedule, so let's hang out if you're going.
That doesn't necessarily mean we can let's go play a game of TI. Like Twilight Imperium is still a long game to play, and it's a convention.
We're not playing any TI. We won't be. We can't play Twilight Imperium and do business. That's the problem.
But we do want to hang out. We want to see people over by the TI games. And, at Gen Con, we did a fun thing where there was like a little, we didn't organize this, but we went to kind of a fun Discord dinner. So if there's a bunch of people that are going to PAX, maybe we can all go get a coffee together or have lunch or dinner or something. That would be very fun. And we'll have a thread in the Discord that'll be like for people to talk about PAX and who's there. Just like we do with Gen Con, we kind of have like a meetup forum area. So we'll have all that going so we can figure out what all to do and what people are doing at PAX. We're excited for it.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun. I've actually never been to Philadelphia either, so that's just gonna
me
be
neither.
Just a cool experience.
Let's go see the American history of our great nation.
Is that where the bell is? The Liberty
Bell?
Bell?
The big bell. That's where the big broken bell is.
Big broken bell, it's called. I'm so excited.
Well, I think people have waited long enough for this one. I'm ready to do some Sardakk guide. And by I mean, Hunter, you kind of took the lead on this one. So it's going to be a lot of you kind of pushing the things. We've talked a lot about it. I've watched you play them a bunch and been in games with other Sardakks, and we kind of both have our ideas. I think the biggest thing to lead off with Sardakk, though, before we even get into the overview stuff, is it's not a great faction, and we need to temper everything we talk about strategy-wise with that idea of they are a bottom tier faction, whatever tier list you're kind of making, they are in the lower, at the very least, the lower half. I can't imagine anybody puts Sardakk in their top half.
Yeah, well, I enjoy playing them a lot, and I think they're hard to play. But I don't know that I agree that they're just like straight up bottom tier.
No, well, I guess they're right.
Rickety.
Depends on how you're structuring it. Yeah, they're rickety. It's interesting to me how much you've come to enjoy them. It's not something I expected at all, but you are sort of kind of fallen in love with the Bug Boys in terms of like how to play them and what you do with them.
Yeah, this time around, I really and you know what? Really, the first time when we did our kind of first pass of strategy guides or whatever we even called them. I don't know what we called them. It was dumb, whatever we were doing.
First round strategies.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Sure. The first time around, they really made my head hurt. Not to the extent that like Muat did, but right. I really liked them. I really wanted them to be fun. I wanted to figure out how to make it work because they have a lot of really interesting attributes, basically.
Right.
And they're very thematic. The fact that they're like kind of the big, dumb, fighty guy at the table.
Right.
That's interesting. But there's kind of always been a trap with Sardakk N'Orr of people playing them as if they're like a good, friendly faction for new players because It's just like, hey, they're mean, they fight, let's do it. But the problem is that Twilight Imperium is not simply a mean fight game. Right. So playing a faction like that has some pretty bad, like, ramifications on like how your game will go, basically. Yeah. If you're like, I'm gonna fight, that's not necessarily gonna work out.
Right. And especially for newer players. I mean, Sardakk N'Orr's like win rates in the rankings we talk about a lot that are, they're okay, but the biggest thing is it's a lot of newer players that fill those things out, and so Sardakk N'Orr's ranking is very bad in that area because if you are encouraging yourself as a new player to just get out there and fight because you're the fighty bugs, it almost always falls flat. So we have to approach Sardakk N'Orr with a really completely different mindset because we are only given warmongery tools. And this is not a warmonger game, so how do you turn that into victory? So let's break down just their component parts, and then go from there in discussing kind of like what we actually are doing with these bugs.
Yeah. So give me their starting units. What we got?
Starting units is a weird, interesting mix of good and bad. You've got 2C4I, which we've talked about in the past, is 2 carriers, and in this case, actually 5 infantry, which is the optimum what you need to go take 2 systems worth of 2 planets in the first round. That's kind of like about the best opening anyone can standard hope for. Obviously, you can like pull off crazy stuff to take more, but that's like the best normal opening. Mm-hmm. So they've got 2 carriers, 5 infantry. They have 1 cruiser, and their home starts with a space lock and a PDS. The big thing that they lack is fighters. Lots of factions start with at least like 2 fighters, and they have none, and this turns out to be a pretty big deal that we will talk more about later. So we actually kind of have gotten to the point where we call it kind of a bad start. It's not a very good starting fleet, despite looking almost like a really good starting fleet. It lacks basically anything to defend your carriers with reliably. That's what the fighters normally serve as.
I would say that the key problem is we've got 3... Like, I mean, it sounds like we got quite a few things, and they're useful things. There's only 3 plastic that we're talking about in the air. We're only talking about 3 ships. That's it, period. Right. If we had even a single fighter, that would change things a little bit. But those carriers are going to go out solo or either with a cruiser, and then the cruiser is going to be committed to wherever we're going. There is a constant battle in early game Sardakk N'Orr of like round 1. Do I leave my home system undefended? What do I do with this cruiser? Should I move it at all? Like that is a big part of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, especially when it comes to round 1, has a lot to do with the fact that you've only got 3 ships to start with.
Yeah. Let's talk about that starting tech. Hunter, what is the Sardakk N'Orr's starting tech?
They don't have any, so there's no tech. There's no tech at all.
Now, seems like it was maybe not that big of a deal. You're only 1 tech behind most factions, 2 tech behind, maybe half. It's like half and half, I guess. But either way, you're only 1 or 2 tech behind. But when people are only getting maybe between 5 and 6 tech per game, being behind 1 to 2 tech turns out to be another huge, like colossal disadvantage, actually. Based mostly on just like the pacing of how quickly you can get tech out and what you're able to do with tech. This is where Sardakk N'Orr falls apart, is in their tech game.
Yeah. It's rough. I mean, like compared to Jolnar is starting with 4 tech and you're starting with literally nothing.
Yeah.
It just feels like, especially with the fact that there are tech objectives, there are 4 of them, they're going to come out likely in your game, and when they come out, it's going to be a problem for you. And I think a lot of this guide is like, all right, how do we tackle these objectives that we literally have a huge disadvantage for? I mean, it is so sad that that tech objectives exist and that there is a faction
with
that
none.
Can't do it, like literally just can't, and then you have Jolnar that can do it without even thinking. That is like basically guaranteed victory points as compared to Sardakk N'Orr, where you are not. They're very much such an underdog faction just for that alone, basically.
Right. And this continued feeling of like, we're behind on the stuff that we need to have at the beginning of the game is going to be more and more what paints our approach to, especially the early game with Sardakk N'Orr, but in general, kind of what the whole scope of the game has to look like is like knowing that you start from behind. You don't have to end behind. It's not like, I think of Winnu as a faction that is kind of almost behind all game. You can lock down Mechatol and you can turn things around for you, but you're still lacking any real powers. Sardakk N'Orr does have a power, and that power is unrelenting, +1 to all combat. It's each result of your unit's combat rolls. Now, this is important to know what this includes and doesn't include. And the faction sheet actually sort of tries to highlight it visually, but it's kind of easy to miss what it's trying to communicate. But it is to say, anything that a ship is rolling in combat in terms of actual rolls versus other rolls is what gets the bonus. But special ability rolls are not getting those bonuses. So things like anti-fighter barrage, space cannon, bombardment, none of that gets the +1. Anything you roll for action cards, dealing some sort of, dealing hits or whatever, you're not getting a +1 to any of that kind of stuff. So it's really narrow focused, and that also sort of paints the type of things we decide to get in our tech game, what little tech game we have. Our biggest goal becomes, how do we not lean into anything that is an ability text, because our faction doesn't take advantage of most ability text things. Now, luckily, we're given some tools to deal with that issue, because I'm kind of skipping around, but we have exotriremes as a special unit. That's sort of basically our other ability. The special units that end up being something you can upgrade operate as another ability, and ours are frickin' awesome dreadnoughts. The main reason that they're amazing at the base level is we just talked about how the ability text is hindered because it's not something we can apply our bonus to. But instead of that, we have bombardments that get to start with 2 rolls on a 4. So the bonus number is baked into the unit itself, and we get double the dice from the get-go. So our dreadnoughts, despite normally being maybe something that aren't especially great because of the way our faction is structured, are incredible and are something very much worth investing in.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Unrelenting, like that we learned very early in the show, is that mathematically the +1 is probably a lot more valuable when it comes to our smaller ships versus our larger ships. So it is beautiful that our dreadnought that gets maybe less out of a +1 than like a fighter does. The fact that our fighters are going to hit so much better and we can make so much more of them and they're so much cheaper is like a kind of economy to it, right? But the fact that our dreadnoughts are also super awesome for this bombardment reason, and also super awesome for, we're going to get to it when we talk about their upgrades, it's, I think, the most potent part of the Sardakk N'Orr. Especially when it comes to the fact that our crummy units are going to hit harder than everybody else's crummy units. So we're the poor man, but like we're just beefier. The +1 when it comes to infantry. That's also very good. We're the only one that can match Soul's infantry as far as like the hit dice itself.
Yeah, that doesn't get talked about, I don't think, quite enough, but like we literally have the exact same. We are, the infantry 2 of Soul has a better reroll ability, but that's not why you love upgraded infantry. You love upgraded infantry because the combat roll is such a big deal in infantry fights. So upgrading Sardakk infantry is something we might consider looking into because it's going to be such a powerhouse thing that we can rely on.
And that goes really neatly into them having a 2-planet home system as well. The fact that we could double dock at home if we wanted and build fighter swarms or lots of cheap units. That's great. And I don't know, did we actually cover the home planets? Like,
no, it's a 2-planet system, and your home system is convenient that it initially grants you 4 resources, which is a big thing we look at, especially because of, like, we want round 1 trade, especially with Sardakk N'Orr, but with any faction, having 4 or more resources is kind of a crucial element to having a good round 1. And they have a 3-1 planet and a 1-0 planet. So basically, you're never going to use the influence. It's kind of worthless to you, but you've got the resources you need to like pull off most standard round 1s. And yeah, like Hunter said, being able to double dock that into a system that can have 8 production value or more if you upgrade the space stocks, that's big, huge swaths of fighters coming out in the late game to really turn your game around.
Yeah, you're like a poor man barony, basically, at that point.
Right, yeah. So the other thing to talk about is their flagship. It's a lot more of the same with Sardakk N'Orr. Most of their things just kind of all revolve around the same idea of +1. The Camoran N'Orr applies +1 to the result of each of your other ship's combat rolls in this system, meaning the Camoran N'Orr has the base +1 that you have with everything else, but all of your other ships are increased even more. So your fighters that start on a 9 and actually hit on an 8, and then you upgrade to a 7, when you have the flagship there, they hit on a 6. So you've got fighters, of which you probably have a lot of them, hitting 50% of the time. That is the power of the Sardakk N'Orr in the late game.
Right.
You notice it's a flagship, so you're not getting it early. You're not getting huge amounts of fighters early. But what we're going to start leaning into is this idea that Sardakk N'Orr is a faction that can swing really, really hard if they can survive until they get to the late game. Because they can just pack such a punch that in some cases is basically undefeatable. You just can't stop the fleets that they bring into your system.
Yeah. I would say in general, I think we've kind of gotten to a place with flagships of saying like that if you don't have the secret objective to unveil your flagship, that it's not always the best idea to build one. I will say I think the Camoran N'Orr does have a place in just any game, regardless of your objectives, as a defensive measure. As a like, all right, I've got a bunch of ships sitting at home, but my fleet supply isn't high enough to pump more ships in there, and I need to defend my home system. That is a great that is a great time to build the Camoran N'Orr. Yeah,
it's a really, really great ship that I love that you're saying to focus on it defensively. There's some flagships where you can do fancy tricks with them, and so people put them way out there in the open. I mean, like Extra is a huge one. You can do really scary stuff with the Extra flagship, the Ghost of Creus. There's things like that, but the Camoran N'Orr is very obviously like almost best used defensively because you can just pack a bunch of stuff in your home system and it's going to lead a lot to your defenses, and I like that idea of it being something to just sit back on, especially if you do get into a late game situation where you're like, okay, now I'm trying to coast for these last points, and the one thing I don't need to have is to lose my home system. If the Camoran N'Orr is parked above it, you're actually in really, really good position.
Right. I just feel like when it comes to utility, this is not that level of like extra flagship where we should just build it regardless or like base our strategy around it or whatever. It might have some utility functions in like a weird situation, but I think the most obvious time to use it is to defend your home system late game.
Yeah, let's talk about their promissory note. It's called Teklar Legion, and you give it to someone, and at the start of an invasion combat, they can apply +1 to the result of each of their units' combat rolls during this combat. If your opponent is the Sardakk N'Orr player, you also apply a -1 to the result of each of their units' combat rolls during this combat, which means you're basically setting Sardakk back to base value and giving yourself a +1. Then, once the combat is over, you return this card to the Sardakk N'Orr player. Hunter, tell me why you freaking love this promissory note.
Well, because I feel like everybody always forgets that it lasts for the entire combat round. when it comes to invasion combat, that is.
You mean the entire combat, the entire
every round,
not one roll, but it lasts for the entire duration of that single combat.
Yes. It's like a morale boost, but you get to play it over and over and over and over. I also feel like invasion combat that's where the most clutch fights happen. So the fact that you can help people out when they really, really, really need it is, I think, my favorite thing about it. The thing that I do not like about it, obviously, is that it can hurt you so badly to be used against you.
Yeah.
That I will go ahead and kind of front load this and say that I am somebody that I pretty much only trade Teklar Legion within the activation that it is needed. It's sort of like the Barony of Letnev card, and that you should use it when people need it and not before. Yep. Because if you use it before, it's going to get traded around. Who knows what, you need to kind of keep it within your purview. But I will say this, I promise it to people a lot. I throw it out there. I say, hey, it looks like you're going to invade this planet like next round or whatever. I can give you Teklar Legion when you need that. Because as long as you're keeping it within the window of activation, they're going to use it. You're going to get it right back. It's just like a superpower you can throw out that way.
Yeah. What my favorite thing that we're kind of setting up with Teklar Legion is the idea. The only way you can trade it to someone in the moment they can use it is if they are the one invading, right? The whole thing with trade is you can't trade to the defending player. Right. So you are using it in an aggressive way. You're using it to help someone aggressing on someone else. And I want to kind of drive home the point that, like, you are helping someone who is pulling things off on the board. We're going to come back around to this idea, basically, of, like, helping maybe the enemy of the table. You're going to make a little bit of an enemy by handing this Teklar Legion to someone who's invading someone else. But that is maybe okay, because if you're getting in the pocket of the right people at the table, it can end up paying off for you many, many times. Yeah. So we're trying to make these relationships with people who are pulling off things, and we're giving them favorable trades with this Teklar Legion because we're giving it to them the moment they need it to take an important planet.
Now, I will say this. You can try and lend it to people for them to use it in a defensive way, but you're going to have to do it a little bit outside of the window of activation. But as long as you keep it secret, or you leave there being a reasonable doubt as far as what you guys just traded, you might be able to get away with it. It's just a little bit trickier to help people defend themselves. But if you know they're going to need it, by all means, throw it to them. If they're going to have it for like a turn, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Let's talk about their faction tech, and the one we've already talked a little bit about was their base units, their exotriremes, but their exotriremes upgrade. The big thing to note is it gains an extra movement to move 2. It gets the normal Dreadnought thing of direct hit can't be used on it, but the biggest thing is this extra ability that Exotrireme 2 gains, and it's after a round of space combat, you may destroy this unit to destroy up to 2 ships in this system. So it's sort of like the Yin ability, if you're familiar with that one, where you can devote a destroyer, kill something. But the big thing with this is the fact that it says you destroy 2 ships. Meaning, if you destroy one Exotrireme 2 and your opponent is Muat with 2 War Suns in the system, you can kill both of those War Suns in one little go. And you get to pick the target. You destroy the 2 ships. So you're targeting down 2 huge capital ships to take out from contention. It's a ridiculously powerful ability. It can be used offensively, but it's even better defensively. It's kind of, you'll see lots of people talk about Exotrireme 2 as the, like, you have to get this as Sardakk N'Orr because it's so good. We're not going to go that far, but it is something that you cannot discount. It's going to be incredibly good, and you have lots of reasons to be building Dreadnoughts throughout the game, so it's not a bad idea to be upgrading that thing. Its issue is that it's a Dreadnought, which means it's blue, blue, yellow upgrade, so that's 4 tech we have to research just to get to it, and depending on the objectives that come out, that can become a tricky puzzle.
Right, and it's not so utility-driven that it feels essential. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to need to do over the course of this guide that we're going to lay out, and Exotrireme, I think, sits kind of just beyond essential, but in games where you can get it, it's going to help you. It obviously helps with control objectives because of the bombardment, which you kind of already have anyways. But also, it is kind of the easiest way to score stuff like destroy their greatest ship. Like, it's literally
you just do that.
and I feel the need to know whenever we have an objective that might be easier for you to score, because you don't have a lot of easy objectives.
Yes.
So remembering that, hey, if I draw that secret objective, maybe that's a reason for me to go after Exo Trireme 2. By all means, obviously. That's the way that you're going to need to play Sardakk N'Orr. If you don't have that, if there's not a lot of control objectives either out there, maybe Exo Trireme is a little win more this time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, defensively, we already have the flagship if we need it. If we need to lock down this game in the late game, the flagship is there, and we don't have to research anything to get to it. We can just get to it. So and I'm sorry I'm kind of coming out a little early based on that, but people get really, really excited about Exo Trireme 2, and I want to just make sure everybody understands that, hey, Exo Trireme 1 is really good too. Right. And, like, let's get the really important stuff done first.
Yeah. Their other faction tech is called Valkyrie Particle Weave. It requires 2 red, which is already the signs of a bad tech. But then outside of that, it's actually a really great tech. After making combat rolls during a round of ground combat, if your opponent produced 1 or more hits, you produce 1 additional hit. It's important to note that this is better defensively than it is offensively, technically. Essentially, if you think of it in terms of a one-on-one fight, if a person invades you with 1 infantry, they will literally never take the planet. So you force other players to find a way to bring more ground forces to ever have any attempt to take any of your planets. Obviously, it can be decent to use against other people, but it is most effective defensively because you can stall out people being able to take your planets. So that makes, like, the 4th time one of our abilities is actually better defensively than it is offensively.
Right. But also, the problem with Valkyrie Particle Weave is going to be tech path-wise. It's just not going to be on the agenda. I would say, in general, that one of the worst secret objectives you could draw as Sardakk N'Orr is both faction tech.
Yes.
You're just not, that's not going to happen.
We just talked about how Exo Trireme 2 is almost out of your reach just by itself, and now you're going to add in the idea that you also need to get 2 red tech to then get Valkyrie Particle Weave. It is literally 7 tech to get your 2 faction techs, and you haven't fulfilled 2 upgrades, you haven't fulfilled, you've barely done 2 tech and 2 colors unless you've skipped to try to get there, faster. So it's just a really, really slow tech path to try to pull that off. And Exo Trireme 2 beats out Valkyrie Particle Weave every single time.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. So if you have 2 faction tech, you just wasted a command counter. You got to get rid of it. You have to get rid of it.
Yeah. Let's talk about something that isn't talked about enough with Sardakk N'Orr. How many commodities you have? You have 3, which is, what do we call it? Like the average amount of commodities.
Sure.
It's a good amount of commodities. 2 sucks. 4 is like you feel kind of rich. Hakon's its own thing. But 3 commodities is good. And Sardakk N'Orr is a faction that needs to constantly remind itself that it has 3 commodities.
Right. And also, we're going to spend those 3. There's this really good Francis Ford Coppola quote where he's talking about how he spends his money because he's trying to make movies, but he's doing it in such a brash, like, crazy way that he said, when I have $10,000, I can spend it like it's $1 million,
right?
Because he's just risking it to such an extent and doing such ballsy stuff with the money that he has for his movies. This is like, obviously we're talking 70s Coppola, not like today Coppola, not like wine Coppola. But I want you to think that way about these 3 commodities. Spend them like there are 6 commodities. Like really try and get yourself involved in the trade game, and we'll talk more about that as we go.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the overview of everything Sardakk N'Orr has got. So let's start trying to get into. Obviously, we try to cover round 1. I want to drive home the fact we always talk about round 1 strategy guides, and I think that round 1 strategy guides are decently important, but I don't want people to think that we believe a game is made or broken by a round 1 strategy guide. And that's why even this time around, in our first round guides, we kind of gave you like a pecking order of like, this is the best one to get, and then this one, and then this one. And we have a little bit of a ranking here for these strategy guides, or these strategy cards, but I don't want you to think that there is always a best thing. There are always circumstances that will lead you to needing a specific strategy card. So when we talk about these, we want to talk about what you should be doing depending on what strategy card you end up getting, because we can't tell you just like, yeah, get tech and rely on your whole strategy being that, because sometimes you don't get tech. So what do you do in that situation? So let's run down the line. Hunter, what do we think about leadership as a pick for Sardakk N'Orr?
I don't hate it. It's like middle to top, I would say. Maybe that like third or fourth slot, depending on what other people pick. The idea that we're going to start building as we talk about each of these strategy cards is early game. We are just trying to solve the problems we can solve, basically. And with all of the resources that we have in front of us at the beginning of a game of Sardakk N'Orr, we want to see like what can we use to kind of wiggle out of this bad start. Right. Leadership is great. It's going to get us command counters. We would love to get ahead. We're literally starting either behind on every resource in the game or just equal to everybody else. So command counters are smart. Let's take them. Let's not try and do a bunch of crazy stuff in round one. Let's get some command counters so that we can save them to go and have a better round two. Sardakk N'Orr is a very like slow round one into better round two kind of faction.
Yeah,
it is not I have enough things to like pull some crazy stuff in round one and then in round two not be completely screwed over. You will get screwed over if you try a bunch of fancy stuff in round one. Don't get cute. Just pick leadership, get the command counters, bank them, and move into round two.
Yeah.
Basically.
If you have leadership, what is your most important secondary to do? The main thing being, we usually talk about tech and warfare, and if you're doing both, or usually you can't afford to do both, so you need to pick one. Which one would you do if you have leadership?
Okay, so I'm gonna put tech as number one. Obviously, again, like we opened this section, a lot of this is conditional. But I'm gonna say tech is pretty obvious. We're gonna want to overcome our tech problems and kind of start working on the tech path that we're gonna lay out right after this section. Warfare, we need fighters. We need to get more plastic on the board. The condition here, and it's a pretty big one, is what I want to do is get involved with trade round one without spending any plastic, without having to move a trade ship out. And I want to be able to make enough money to make all of these investments seem worth it, which seems like a lot to do. That's too much. That's too much to do. Right. So do not fall into that trap. Pick one or two of those things, do those things, and then just move forward into a solid round two. You're going to have a way better round two than a round one if you take leadership, especially if you take it a little slow and maybe, bank a command counter or two, basically.
Yeah. When Hunter says trade ship, he's talking about the idea that, like, okay, we've got this cruiser. It's got movement 2. I can go park it above an equidistant planet or adjacent to someone's, like, home system or whatever, adjacent to wherever they're sending their fleet, and that will make me neighbors with them, which means we are now allowed to trade. A lot of people send out that trade ship to whoever has the trade strategy card. You establish a relationship. Sardakk N'Orr is in this weird situation, like we talked about earlier, of having basically no extra ships, so that cruiser is not something we can easily just send out to the middle of the map so that we can go get 2 or 3 trade goods. That is not worth the investment. But if you can get someone to come to you, then a lot of your context changes.
Right.
Let's quickly talk about diplomacy. If you're noticing a trend, we've heard your backlash. We don't like to talk about diplomacy very much. Lots of groups are not afraid of diplomacy, but we don't consider it something you should do round one. It offers too much to the rest of the table. I guess with diplomacy, the one thing to note is you do have those 4 resources at home. If you had a great system outside of home, okay, maybe you go do that. But the argument always comes back to everyone else probably gets to do it better than what you get to get. So we're basically not recommending diplomacy.
Yeah, definitely not. And it's to your relationship to the rest of the table, as far as like they're literally getting a better start than you. Why would you help them either keep up or exceed your start?
Yes.
We don't need to give them that. It's too much.
Yeah. Hunter, tell me about politics. You're into it.
Politics is my probably number one favorite round one pick for Sardakk, because it kind of fits into my philosophy of the early game for Sardakk very neatly. It gives us a lot of different things that are useful. So we get action cards. One of the things that I'm going to basically suggest is that when you get action cards as Sardakk N'Orr, that you basically act as a mercenary with these cards. We want to take cards that are useful and sell them to other players. It's like, I'm gonna play this card on your behalf. If there's a Hakan in the game, forget about it. We're just show them to Hakan and just be like, please give me money.
What do you want? Yeah.
You need the money more than you need the cards. You are a pretty simple faction when it comes down to it. And we're not going to be doing a lot of sneaky early game stuff.
Yeah.
If we fix our problems by the mid game, then we don't need the cards. We're gonna be great. We're gonna be solid. So the action cards are great. That's a valuable resource. And you know what, I like. It could be a situation where you get an early flank speed that then helps you overcome your mobility problems in early game. I'm not going to act like that's not a part of it as well. It's just there's a lot of action cards in there that are very sellable. Yeah. The other thing is a speaker token. I'm not even so much suggesting like, oh, we need the speaker token going into round 2. No, we've got so many problems that we do not need that. We are going to sell that to our neighbor and get some money for that, for sure. That is my favorite thing about it.
And when Hunter talks about selling that speaker token, what he's referring to, I think we've confused people because we're not getting to visually show what selling a speaker token really looks like. The big idea is, no, you can't trade the speaker token. You don't get to give it away. But when you play politics, part of the ability is deciding who receives that speaker token. Yes. So the whole idea of selling it is you can look to the player that's sitting to your right, meaning they could become first in strategy order, making you only second, not a problem at all in most cases. You can say, hey, I will choose you to be the speaker instead of choosing myself if you give me something. That's what we mean when we say trading the speaker token. We're not really, or selling the speaker token. It's not an actual transaction outside of what the other person is giving us, but us giving the speaker token is not technically a transaction.
Right.
So anyways, I just wanted to interrupt that for sort of a breakdown of that.
My favorite thing about selling the speaker token as Sardakk round 1, 2 is one of the problems is that, hey, we need to make some extra dollars because we have an economy problem, a pretty major economy problem round 1. Yeah. How do we convince someone to send their ships to us to trade with us because we don't want to do it, right? We have a plastic problem. We need to get more plastic on the board. If I have politics in the speaker token, generally speaking, in most metas, now I can already smell the pushback I'm going to get on this. Generally speaking, you have the speaker token, so you have the leverage, so they are going to have to come to you in order to trade with you. And that is the ideal situation that we're looking for. So politics kind of helps us get started on a lot of problems that we have. It gives us some action cards that we can sell for trade goods, and it gives us a speaker token that we can sell for more. And you know what? Even if for some reason they don't want to buy it from you, which I don't know why they wouldn't be down to give you some ducats. Right. Let's say they're not. Well, hey, at least we're first pick round 2. Like at least we can pick exactly what we need to kind of like go whatever direction it is we want to go.
Check. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about construction. Yes. We've kind of put construction here as like a middle of the road. It's fine. We're not going to get mad at it. But there's a couple different ways to think about construction. The biggest thing is, Hunter, earlier you mentioned having 2 space docks at home isn't something that hurts us. We don't mind it.
Yes.
But even more importantly, if you're able to go take a good forward planet right away and then put a space dock on that planet, having a solid forward dock, one of those 3 resource planets that you can put a space dock on, that is even more ideal, and it's a positional thing, and that's really the theme of our round 1 and 2 is, yes, we're trying to improve our economic standing, but more than anything, we're trying to do that without sacrificing any positional advantages.
Right.
So having a forward dock allows us to, in round 2, immediately start reinforcing in the middle of our slice. We're able to put things not just way tucked back behind in our home system, but out there in the field, ready to get work done round 2 and 3.
Yes. And I think the thing about construction is a lot of times you don't really pick construction so much as you just get stuck with it in the last spot. And really what I'm trying to say is that when that happens at Sardakk, that's not the worst thing.
Right.
To happen. For a forward dock makes a lot of sense for you. You can always think about double docking in the home system. Depending on how your slice is set up, you might want to do that. And then PDS is just going to help you through the early game not look like somebody to be messed with. Because honestly, in spite of your +1, you look like someone to be messed with like early on. You do not look that scary, really, at all. There are a number of factions that are going to have the mobility to mess with you in a way that you don't want, and that PDS is going to help it just be like, all right, so I am safe from any early aggression, basically.
Yeah. This is kind of where we're starting to, I think, show more of our hand of like our philosophy on Sardakk, which is some people propose like a really early, intense plastic advantage, and like, hey, forget about tech. Just go all in on spending every dollar you got on more ships. And that would, in theory, fix the things we keep talking about, right? More plastic on the board means we don't look as weak in our slice. But it's that positional nature of it, the fact that, like, okay, we could get money, but then we're just sending stuff out, and then we're just building it at home, and then not increasing our tech draw, which is, something we have limited time to deal with. That is sort of the issue with all these things. So when we now start talking about trade is a really weird pick for us because we've talked already about we don't want to send our cruiser out as a trade ship because it already sacrifices some of that plastic that needs to be being kept close to home. And, we want money, but we don't want money at the expense of position. We don't want money at the expense of increasing our tech gain. So, Hunter, you've called trade here a conditional pick. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not also an automatic grab. Can you kind of give me more info there?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to, there's just a lot of different scenarios you can kind of paint where trade in the hands of Sardakk round 1 is not enough to solve their problems. Yeah. Essentially, if you take trade round 1 with Sardakk, it needs to be because you're confident that you are actually going to make a lot of money out of it. And because of the plastic problem, our ability to get neighbors we're very limited in that way. So if you're like, let's say, I don't know, there's a couple different like really easy examples I could throw out there. Like, let's say there's a Hakan at the table besides you. They're probably just going to completely cut past you anyways, and there's probably nothing you can do about that. I mean, obviously you can just decide to like not refresh anybody, but even at that point, it's a con. They're probably going to be just fine. Yeah. And even maybe not trade with you because, hey, now you didn't like refresh everybody. A lot of times what we're looking for is I want to be Sardakk N'Orr, I want to have the trade card, and I want to have leverage. And that's a lot to ask, basically.
Yeah. That leverage point is actually kind of a huge deal. The factions that are great with trade round 1 are the ones that have leverage. And Sardakk N'Orr, you just don't have any, so you may not be able to bring anybody to the table with trade. Sometimes it can work out, but you got to start that conversation before you even pick the card.
Yes,
you got to know that people are going to be your trade partners before you even get in bed with that being your strategy,
and that they're willing to make the positional commitment in order to make it make sense. Like let's say there's like a ghost in the room. If I can get that ghost to send a ship all the way over to me or whatever, then yeah, sure, we're fine, we're golden. Let's go for it. That sounds like a great pick. Yes. And that is going to solve a lot of our problems because we're going to be able to invest in tech. We're going to be able to do secondary of warfare and get some fighters on the board. That's great. But if you're not confident that that is the situation you're going into, either because of the meta or because of the factions at the table, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think three trade goods is enough to fix your deal. I would rather get a lot of other things done, basically.
Yeah. If you can get the 7 or 8 trade goods, then trade's great. But we're trying to make sure everyone focuses on the idea that we're trying to have a reliable round 1 and 2, not a fancy, let me go do crazy stuff round 1 and 2. That's just not how Sardakk gets to operate. Yeah. And speaking of fancy and crazy, let's talk about warfare, because warfare is when people let their Magic Christmas land hats go crazy. They come up with all the wild things that they can go accomplish. And we have to remind everyone that when we have warfare, we still lack on plastic. We still lack on those fighters and everything like that. So, Hunter, if we have warfare, what are we doing with it?
We're going to spread ourselves too thin. I don't. It's weird to say this because warfare is traditionally one of the better strategy cards for any faction, but I just feel like with Sardakk, you just can't make it work. You're going to move out with what? You're going to have a carrier and maybe send your cruiser out too far, too close. We're not going for Mechatol. Let's not kid ourselves. We're not going for an early round 2 Mechatol. You can't take the heat of that.
Yeah.
Like it would literally require basically none of the other factions to give you any guff about it in order for it to make any sense.
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, like, it just feels to me like we can't take advantage of it. So let's not go down that path. Just let somebody else take that heat. We're trying for a slow start into like a more solid mid game. Yeah. So yeah, don't get ahead of yourself. And yeah, I'm a pretty strong advocate of, I would probably take Warfare if for some reason I was last and it got to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I would take it over Imperial scenario. Or Diplomacy, but that's never going to happen. So it doesn't, just let somebody else take it.
Yep. Yeah. I want to kind of really drive home the idea of, yeah, we have a +1, and people seem to think that means they can push for early advantages or whatever. But if you think about it with that starting fleet, it's okay, your carrier goes from hitting on a 9 to hitting on an 8.
Yeah.
But when it is faced with someone who decides, oh, you took that equidistant from me and I actually really want it, I'm going to come in with a carrier, 2 fighters, and maybe a destroyer or a cruiser. I'm going to absolutely be able to take out that carrier. That carrier is not a threat at all. So the only way you can move aggressively with those units is if you can get lots of units out immediately. And that's just not something... What you do when you do that is you sacrifice your tech game, and we are very much not proponents of ignoring the tech game. Tech is something... There are too many objectives that can come up. And not just objectives, but upgrades allow for more mobility. We're going to talk about that a lot more when we get into tech paths, but you're not getting upgrades just for the objectives. You're getting upgrades because they're going to allow you to do things you wouldn't normally be able to do, and that's pretty crucial to your mid and late game. Right. So spreading too thin with Warfare is dangerous. If anything, if I have Warfare with Sardakk N'Orr, I'm kind of just trying to play it close to the vest anyways. If I have got 3 systems adjacent to home, those are the only ones I want to take. I don't want to go take adjacent to Mech Hall. I don't want to go take equidistance. I just want to build up a nice little home base. And I was wondering, Hunter, if you think there's kind of some validity in not even worrying about using Warfare in that way, but instead, like, okay, we keep talking about this fighter problem. Can we use Warfare to build at home, first action, build some fighters, a couple other ships, basically spend our 4 resources right out the gate, and then lift and move out? There's some obvious glaring problems with that idea, despite, again, it giving us that plastic advantage we so desperately want.
Well, that's an interesting idea. I think one of the main problems is production-wise, it actually doesn't work, right? So we're actually wasting $1 if we do that. Yeah. We can only build up to 5. Right. So we're going to spend $3 for 6 fighters. We're only going to get 5 fighters.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Right. And then we just got $1 left over that, we're probably not going to be able to spend on anything. So in that way, I really, really don't like it. The other thing is that if we have Warfare and going into round 2, the likelihood of us getting tech is like 0, that means our tech game is going to be very, very, very slow. Yeah, if we don't get a single tech round 1 and we have no shot at getting executing the tech primary round 2, that's awful. And that is definitely not what we are advocating for. We are not going for that, like, ignore tech, just do plastic, because it's almost impossible to win. How are you going to win the game now? If a single if 2 tech objectives come out, how are you going to win? That's so wild to me.
Yeah. Similar to Diplomacy, Warfare, if we rely on a strategy with Warfare that doesn't allow us to stall Warfare, we're having more of that problem of, hey, we've just unlocked everybody else's abilities way more. Yep. We've given everybody else more, and that's just set ourselves even more further behind. Right. If lifting Warfare is our second, or if we're somehow able to make it our 3rd action, almost everybody is building extra fleets at home that are going to help them expand more or do more or whatever. And that's certainly not the thing we want. Sardakk N'Orr would be the kind of faction where you only really want Warfare if you have a reliable way to stall it out all the way. But as we've already said, doing it that way means you're probably spreading yourself really thin. So it's just a catch-22 no matter how you cut it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what is obviously kind of the top get for Sardakk N'Orr, technology.
Yeah, technology is great. It just lets us do a couple of the things that we need to do. And that's why, my favorites are tech and politics, because it feels like they both get a couple of different things started for us. Obviously, we get a tech. We are going to be we're going to have the money left over to like secondary off warfare for possibly another carrier, some fighters. That would be dope. More fighters and cruiser. That would be cool too, depending on the timing. You're going to have to just play that one by ear. But the fact that we're going to get a tech and some more plastic, that's wonderful. Now, as far as the idea of, what if I get, I'm able to trade and double tech round one, that's a little bit scary because, like I said, we have a plastic problem, and the idea is to solve more than one of our problems in the round. So, I believe technology does that, and I believe politics does that most effectively. The rest are all a little questionable, with trade being super conditional. Like, trade could shoot up to that third spot,
absolutely,
depending on what type of table we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you've got a Hakan and Ghost at the table and your first pick, trade might be an amazing pick because that's like two people you could be guaranteed money from. You could make out like just absolutely like a bandit, but that is purely conditional. The last one, which of course we're not going to break down, is Imperial. Imperial is basically a useless get in round one, and so don't do it. But let's talk about going into round two and the kinds of things that we're focused on. We sort of hinted at some things with each of the different strategy cards, but the biggest thing is we're going to break down a pecking order later, but the thing I want you to mostly focus on in round two is how are we going to start accomplishing the economic objectives?
Yes.
If any are already up, then we want to start seeing how those are going to be accomplishable. And if any aren't, maybe even still start planning for some economic objectives that come out, and then also setting yourself up for other objectives. But a big thing with our strategy with Sardakk N'Orr is focusing on economic objectives first.
Yeah. So we're good at fighting. That's the whole thing with Sardakk N'Orr. Sometimes people talk about Sardakk N'Orr like you need to go for the control objectives first. I feel like it's the other way around. We're good at it. Why do we need to focus on it? Let's get the slow, easy ones figured out, while we still kind of need to be slow and easy.
Yeah, they're almost a Euro. You have an engine builder you're working on right now.
Yes.
And that engine builder is going to score you those control objectives in the late game, not early on. You're going to screw up your engine if you go for it too soon.
I agree. Just the plastic problem, we need to solve that first. Another thing that is important that I have pretty much seen almost every single game I've seen where someone won with Sardakk, and every game that I've won with Sardakk, at some point I double teched. And generally speaking, it was in the early, maybe mid-game at the latest. So we are gunning for taking technology and researching two tech for sure. Round two, I think, would be ideal. I mean, honestly, my favorite opening is politics into round two. I take tech, and I sell the speaker token to somebody that's not going to take tech round two, and then I get it. All of that would just be the ideal start. I got a little bit of money, I got a little bit of plastic, I got a lot of bit of tech, basically. That's the idea. Other things to think about, a forward dock for Sardakk is, I think, super important. Double docking is cool. What I would like to be able to do is have a slice that feels secure, because we are going to start talking about gumming up the works with Sardakk. I am very much a fan of using Fighter 2 to kind of make Sardakk's slice more secure. So forward dock is obviously going to help with that. It's also going to help for any kind of ambitious, like, mid-game control objective stuff that we might be going after. And the other thing in round two is to, really start wheeling and dealing. If we've got action cards, we're talking about trading them. If we've got, we're trying to get involved in trade as much as possible, even if we're not taking the trade strategy card. If we're not, we still want to, give favorable trades, let people, throw your 3 commodities out there for 2, whatever you got to do. Just stay involved and get a little bit of money. We're trying to get a little bit of everything, basically.
Yeah, the big thing is that you started with not enough plastic. Hopefully round 1 you fixed it a tiny bit. Round 2 you're really trying to fix that, and using trade to make an effort to fix that. I think within the first 3 rounds, if you haven't taken tech once and you haven't taken trade once, you're probably falling behind. Within the first 3 rounds, those 2 strategy cards are really great to get. Yeah, if anything, basically, like Hunter was saying, politics into tech into trade round 3
that would be awesome.
Is like completing the trifecta of all the things you should be focusing on. You're focusing on building that engine, you're making friends, you are not going out and being hyper aggressive on anybody, because that's the way to lose a trade partner, and we are not worried about that right now. We're trying to get all of our economies active and online and in a way where they run themselves.
Yeah. And yeah, just kind of as we go, because I mean, every game with Sardakk, you're going to feel, even if you're not spreading yourself thin, you're just going to feel a little thin. That's just how it's going to work out. But let's just be conscious of like where we're putting our ships. Let's be defensive with how we use the cruiser that we start with. For instance, if I kind of waffled between moving the cruiser out and putting it in a spot where it's like, hey, you can't get to me because you'd have to fight this cruiser first, so you're just not going to bother, basically. Those types of moves, but also just like leaving the cruiser at home in order to like respond to an attack. That was something that I would do the first 2 rounds. But in general, a lot of times people would say, hey, Hunter, round 2, you seem kind of thin. What's up? And it's just because I'm focusing on a little bit of everything. You're probably not going to feel very safe until round 3, which is another reason why this is very much not a Mechatol Rex early Sardakk that I'm describing here. I don't know what that would take, important. But that is not what I'm advocating for.
Well, okay, so we've set up this Sardakk that is actually incredibly focused on trade and focused on being a buddy. Especially, with what, one neighbor, both neighbors, who are we wheeling and dealing with specifically?
So it's basically whoever we can get to. I mean, we're just gonna be, we're gonna get involved with trade. We're gonna be shameless about it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter if we're overfeeding somebody or if the table is really upset at so-and-so, they don't want you to trade with them, whatever. No, we're going to trade with whoever will trade with us, especially those that are willing to come to us and not make us come to them. Again, positional considerations are very important for Sardakk early game. Plastic is very important. Like we don't want to lose any plastic. We don't want to give up any solid position. We want them to send their trip to us to trade, not the other way around.
So we've made our slice safe. We are feeling a little bit more comfortable, but we are still sort of behind on tech, and we can't forget that. We do not have enough. So let's start talking about tech paths. And I think the biggest and most important thing to know here is we have to not make any wasted buys. Every single tech is hugely important. If any tech path matters, it is Sardakk N'Orr's tech path. So, Hunter, we kind of have set up the basic building blocks for almost any and all tech paths, and then we let them break out from there. But what are the must gets, if we're going to call it that? They feel like must gets to me.
Yeah,
I wonder
they
if
feel
you
that
agree.
way to me. No, they feel that way to me. Neural, right away. It's got to be Neural round 1. Sorry that I basically won't negotiate on that, because like I said, we got to get a hold of every resource that we possibly can, and action cards are going to be one of those resources that we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on selling them. We're going to focus on using them the right way. Like Neural got to be right after Neural. I want to do anti-mass, and then from anti-mass I want to go into Fighter 2. Anti-mass obviously is only important for getting us to Fighter 2.
Right.
We're not worried about the other things that anti-mass does, but Fighter 2 is great for a lot of reasons. It's probably the most efficient upgrade I feel like you can get for Sardakk N'Orr, and that fighters are cheap, and now they hit really good. They hit crazy good. They're ridiculous now. With our +1 that we already get and the +1 that you get for having the upgrade. And the other thing that we want to use them to do is make our slice safe. We want to gum up the works, essentially, early game with Sardakk, to make sure that nobody is trying to hurt us, because our plastic is... I mean, I'm basically admitting that if you follow this guide, you're not going to have as much plastic as everybody else going into round 3. Like, I guarantee that's going to be true. Fighter 2 is going to make it so that is not that big of a deal. Essentially, the only weakness with this is through the silence of space. And if someone is using that on you early game, you got trolled. Whatever.
Yeah, they had your number.
I can't do anything for you for that. And then after Fighter 2 kind of gives us that utility, that structure, we want to go into Grav Drive so that we can start being a little more ambitious ourselves with what objectives we're going to achieve, basically.
Yeah, I love this decision to go Grav Drive after Fighter 2 because for so many other factions, it's like, hey, the faster you can get to Grav Drive, the better, because that's going to allow us to start doing stuff. But Sardakk is not about doing stuff early. It's about avoiding attention and making friends and building up to where we finally will have a plastic advantage later on. We will get there. We're not going to just be behind all game. It's just these first couple rounds where we're trying to make sure everything gets online. The Neural thing, I think there's going to be plenty of people who think Starwing Tools is a great way to start with Sardakk N'Orr because, hey, it's going to feed into Exo Trireme 2s. Starwing Tools is an extra resource every time we build. That's more plastic. That's fixing the plastic advantage, isn't it? The issue is our tech path is so tight and so rigid, we're not going to go too blue, too yellow, right? That's not really the path we want to go down in almost any situation. Too blue, too green is the optimum way to go. If the only tech we got at all was up to Grav Drive and then up to Dax of Animators in green, and then we got Carrier 2, Infantry 2, Fighter 2, that's it, we're done. And all of those are great, and they feed into everything we're trying to do. That's like the basic version of this. Now, that's still not even actually quite going to be what we're going to recommend, but that is what you do if 2 techs in 2 colors comes out. That's the path you end up having to go down.
Right.
But for us, we're trying to accomplish something different. But that Neural first gives us not just utility, but like Hunter said, it's a different kind of economy. You can make more than $1 or $2 per round off of Neural Motivator. It's entirely possible to make that happen. So we finish Neural, Anti-Mass, Fighter 2, and then Grav Drive. If we don't have any tech, let's ignore tech skips altogether. Hunter, where do we go from there? What is our next path if we have 0 tech skips?
So if we have no skips, we're going to go for Carrier 2 because it combos very well with Fighter 2, and also, again, it all just comes down to mobility. And if we've been building fighters in the first 2 rounds, we're probably going to need carriers to move them all around, huh?
Yeah.
And then from that, we go to Sarween and then Exo 2, basically.
Yeah, and people are going to scoff at that because that's a late grab of Sarween Tools, and that's not ideal in most cases.
Right. This is if you have no skips. We would love to skip Sarween, obviously. And in fact, if we did have a yellow skip, the path is literally just Carrier 2 to Exo 2. And then it honestly doesn't even really matter what else you get because we kind of got all the main things that we want.
Right.
But the thing about Exo 2s is that if we can get to them, we want to get to them because they're late game killers, basically.
Yeah.
They're just like, once we get to the point where Exo 2s come on the board, that's going to be the thing that helps us really scare people in the late game. It's a good deterrent. People don't want to have to fight against Exo 2s because you get to assign the hit, basically.
Yeah.
And it's really potent in helping us get some of the action phase secret objectives figured out, basically. So yeah, we and Carrier 2, I feel like maybe I need to justify that one a little bit more. It's really just about capacity. I love the economic deal of having fighters that hit really good. We don't need to be spending a lot of money on any individual thing with Sardakk. I'm thinking we upgrade to Carrier 2, and we just keep those 2 carriers that we've got out. They can come back. One of them can come back home, load up with fighters, and now we've got a really awesome fleet, basically.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, is we're setting up... Our tech path kind of perfectly showcases the way our game goes, right? Neural to fix some problems, into Fighter 2 to secure our slice with a plastic advantage, into Carrier 2 and Exos to punch to okay, now is when we jump out there and go do stuff and hit really hard and make our presence known on the table, but not before, right? We're not rushing to Carrier 2, we're not rushing to Exo 2, we're getting everything else established first, and then in that late game being unstoppable, because you are very stoppable up until that point.
Right.
To talk about other tech skips, if you have a green skip, that is a great situation to be in. Green skip gets really weird because hypermetabolism is always very good, and if we start with Neural, it's really tempting to want to get hyper like right away. You may end up wanting to get hyper right after Neural. I don't hate that, Hunter. I think you still really want to get Fighter 2 right away because that plastic advantage is a pretty important and big deal.
It depends. I mean, I think the variable there is because obviously hyper is better the earlier you get it. the more command counters you're going to get. And obviously we have an economy problem like that. We could use those command counters. I think the problem is imagining a game where you feel so safe that you've been able to prioritize tech and get a green skip that you're going to be able to spend as a skip and not for any dollars. And then also you're not having a plastic problem. That just sounds like you're going to have too many problems in order to do that. But hey, you know what? If it happens and you just end up making a lot of money early game, maybe it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's impossible to be good. I just think going for Fighter 2 as quickly as we can is like the safest play, basically.
Yeah. And if anything, too, because we want to focus on that first, there's a part of me that wants to just ignore Hyper entirely and just use the green skip to get Infantry 2.
Right.
This is actually sort of one of the only situations. This and having the objective 2 tech and 2 colors come up is really the only situation where we actually really want Infantry 2. Because your infantry are already great, and you don't necessarily need to upgrade them.
Oh, for sure.
The difference here between Soul is Soul starts blue-green. You're like always getting Infantry 2 because it's right there. It's like it's handed to you. It's not handed to Sardakk N'Orr, but if you have the green skip, having infantry that hit as good as your Infantry 2 are, if you're hitting on a 6, that's quite good. So it is worth getting if you've got the green skip. If you don't have it, I don't think I want to make the time for it because I would rather work towards getting exotriremes.
I agree.
And then let's talk about blue skip. What do we do with a blue skip?
Blue skip is interesting because we can get Fighter 2 so much faster now. We can get Neural into Fighter 2. And what's cool about that is we don't even have to take tech round 1 or round 2 then.
Right.
We can kick tech down to round 3 or even round 4, I feel like, with a blue skip, provided the tech objectives don't hurt us. But yeah, Neural into Fighter 2, into Sarween, into Grav Drive, into Carrier 2, and then finally Exo 2. That's a lot of tech. But that's, what I
dislike about that is what we just described, that Neural, Fighter 2, Sarween, Grav Drive, Carrier 2, Exo 2 uses that blue skip 4 separate times.
Yep.
That's a lot. That's spending 5 tech every single time you do it. Like the what you gain from skipping anti-mass 4 times actually probably isn't that much. So that's the biggest reason why the blue skip always kind of ends up being actually the most lackluster, because what it gains you isn't that huge of a deal. It's worth considering that, basically, but I think there's a world where you do Neural into Fighter 2 and then you still then go get anti-mass so that you don't need to keep using the tech skip for other stuff. I don't know. That obviously that has different trade-offs, and it depends on what you're doing after the fact. But I don't love using the blue tech skip every single time I use tech.
Right. I will say this. I think we're not even really going to talk about the red skip because it's so bad. I think the yellow skip is obviously my favorite in order to skip Sarween into Exo 2. That's very clean. That's very good.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't really care too much for any of the other skips. They're definitely in the order that we talked about them: yellow, green, and then blue, and then absolutely no red. Yeah. But yellow is like number 1 by a lot, and then there's a huge gap until green, basically.
Yeah. The funny thing about a red skip is, okay, do we talk about Valkyrie Particle Weave? Well, we would get Plasma, and then we would skip Magen to get Valkyrie Particle Weave, right? That's the idea. Well, Plasma... Our Dreadnoughts already roll 2 dice.
Yep.
Is it really that much better to roll a 3rd dice on a bombardment? No, it's a bit win more. It's not necessary. That is also not improving. The plasma scoring is going to improve Space Cannon, which is not an ability that takes advantage of our Unrelenting faction ability. So, not especially useful. Plasma is kind of half useful for Sardakk N'Orr. And at the end of the day, any red skip is either a 0-4 planet or a 1-3. The extra command counter is more worth it, no matter what. No matter how you cut it, that extra command counter, the round you would be using it as a red skip, it's better as a command counter. So that's like the number 1 reason we're not making the time for Valkyrie Particle Weave. I hear a lot of people groaning. I agree, Valkyrie Particle Weave is a cool tech, but in a 10-point game, it's not going to happen. Try it in your 14-point games.
Right.
Maybe.
And then I think our last path to talk about is kind of the what if the tech objectives come out really fast? And if that is so, then we're going to do the kind of original one that we described, which was Neural, Anti-Mass, Fighter 2, Grav Drive, and then Carrier 2, Daxiv, infantry 2. We don't want this, by the way. This is
ideal.
a lot of tech for us to have to get. We are not gunning for this. What I hate about this one is we don't get the idea that we're getting XO2s after that. Oh boy.
No way
we're probably not getting that as far as we just described in a single game of Sardakk N'Orr. But that's why, I don't know. Yeah, I think my favorite path for them would be to avoid one of the tech objectives, because I don't imagine I'm going to reliably get to avoid both of them, and then basically cobble together like a Fighter 2, Carrier 2, Exo 2 kind of setup, basically.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the upgrade objectives actually aren't that bad for you. You're going to get, ideally, you'll get the 3 upgrades, whether it'll be Carrier 2 and Fighter 2, and then it's either going to be Exo Triremes or Infantry 2. You're going to end up with 3 upgrades.
Right.
It's the spread yourself thin in the different colors of text that is really, really tricky for you.
Yeah.
I like in the 2 and 2 colors scenario, you talk about infantry being last. That's another way to reinforce the idea that, like, hey, we need to focus. Tech, we are not getting the tech for the bonus to combat. We already have the bonus to combat. We don't care about that at all. And we're not in a situation with Sardakk where our home system is in such a weird, tenuous position where we need the reroll from Infantry 2 that doesn't do that much for us. So Infantry 2 is just a cool late game upgrade to get because the 2 and 2 colors came out and all that. You'll note we're not getting the 2 and 2 colors until our second to last tech. Daxiv is the second to last tech that we get. We are holding out and we're just scoring 2 and 2 colors pretty late, and we're trying to focus on all the other objectives that are at the table first, and knowing eventually we will get to 2 and 2 colors and we'll score it then.
Right. And
if there's a situation where you can't do that, yes, fit Daxiv in somewhere earlier. It's okay to do that if you know that the route to get the objectives in the order you have to get them isn't going to pay off.
Yeah, I would say if you felt like we just threw out a lot of different stuff at you too quickly, if you wanted to simplify it in your head, it's kind of, to me, Neural, Anti-Mass, Fighter 2, and then even, like, honestly, Grav Drive is even debatable after that. For me, after Fighter 2, do what you need to do. You know what I mean?
Right,
I mean, don't do anything crazy, like go down red or yellow. We're staying in blue-green, okay? And the only yellow we're going to grab is Sarween, and it's only if we absolutely have to. But yeah, stay in blue-green, get Fighter 2. After that, you can kind of remix this stuff however you need. Do not sacrifice a point just to do it in a way that feels more efficient. Like, no, if you got to grab Daxiv for no reason other than to score the point, that's the game that we're playing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start transitioning into a little bit more talk on the trade. We talked a lot about trade, but we really talked about it specifically from the focus of like round 1 and 2 and how desperate you are for people to come to you. But let's talk about once we actually have like a decent board position. We've got plenty established neighbors. The wormholes are helping us, whatever. We've got like 4 neighbors and we're feeling okay at the table with our plastic presence. You know, we're talking round 4-ish.
Right.
Now, what does trade look like?
Yeah. So I make a lot of promises when I play Sardakk. I have sold. It's a fire sale when I am playing Sardakk. I have sold sabotages to people. I sold a sabotage to a Jolnar for a research agreement after I'd already gotten them to sell it to me like 3 or 4 times, basically. That is a very, very wild scenario that is probably not going to happen to you very often. But the way I was able to get to that wild scenario was just having this attitude of everything I have is tradable. If I need to give you my political secret, whatever. If I got to give you my, here's my trade agreement for this thing right now, whatever.
Right.
Specifically, we want to talk about making sure that we're always taking advantage of Teklar Legion.
Right.
At one point, I had probably promised my Teklar Legion to like half the table, basically. Now, and what we're looking for is so as far as Teklar Legion goes, because I'm not going to just hand the card over to somebody, we have to kind of devalue it a little bit, right? So, like, they don't have 100% faith that they're going to get Teklar Legion because I'm not handing it to them. But I'm still going to promise it to them for, like 2 trade goods, whatever. I'll promise it to you for 1 trade good. I'll promise it to you for whatever because I need the money, okay?
Yeah. The big thing, too, is every single time anyone attacks anyone else's planets, you get in there. You are an annoying... Okay, so a lot of this strategy is based off of, Hunter, you saw the game with Schroeder playing Sardakk N'Orr. And that's what we are thinking like. We are thinking like a used car salesman. We'll sell our left leg to get a little bit of cash to make the next sale and keep moving on, right?
Yeah.
So every time someone goes to attack a planet where there's going to be a ground combat, hey, do you need Techlar Legion? 1 trade good, 2 trade goods, 1 trade good per planet, whatever it is, get in there and always be talking to people. Don't forget, again, you have 3 commodities. It's good. That's a good amount of commodities to get stuff done. You can get 2 to 3 to 4 trade goods per round, depending on who you're negotiating with.
Right.
You can move that money around really, really well.
Yeah.
Hunter, you're talking about the ACs. I love the idea that we are not committed to using our own action cards. That is the opposite of how I usually think about action cards, but it is exactly in keeping with like what Sardakk is trying to pull off, which is like, I don't want to look like the crazy guy at the table. I don't want to look like the guy who's got a big hand of action cards and everyone goes, hey, wait a second, what's Sardakk? What are they plotting over there? I don't, you don't want to be feared until the moment you finish your engine and you turn everything on.
Right.
So selling off the action cards, being the buddy, means people just stop thinking about you as a threat in general. You're making everything favorable, right? I mean, you're trying to make everyone look like they're getting the better end of the deal.
It's that type of situation where you just need to make the trade happen. If you have to sell something for less than its value, sorry, like you gotta basically. So yeah, I mean, get it out there. Be very, very sweet when it comes to like commodity trades and stuff. Wash people for free. Do whatever it is you got to do to build up a lot of goodwill and do as many deals as possible. One thing that even came up. Well, and actually, I'll bring this up later. But I would say specifically, think about trying to make friends with the scarier factions. Jol Nar, you have a very obvious relationship with Jol Nar in that Jol Nar struggles to take planets with their weak infantry. You have Techlar Legion that totally solves that problem for them. They have research agreement, which is going to help you get a bunch of crazy tech that you would not normally have access to. Do it. Go for it. Give it a shot. Wheel and deal with Hakan. Be Hakan's little henchman and just do whatever Hakan tells you in order to get some of their juicy trade goods. Because when you are like, Hakan needs to get fed in order to be a good faction. If Sardakk gets fed, that's game over for everybody, basically. That's the idea, is whenever you're doing deals with people, you kind of, as long as you can solve your disadvantages, it's turning it into an advantage for you, basically.
So we're transitioning really heavily into the mid game. We're making these trades and everything. Let's re-talk about this topic of the objectives and how we are doing Sardakk N'Orr's objective game kind of opposite of how we try to normally think about objectives. Most factions, it's, man, you got to get those hard ones out of the way, because in the late game, you might not have any way to accomplish that. People are going to have built up too much. It's going to be too difficult to go get that 3rd tech specialty or that 4th planet trait or whatever. Those positional control objectives can be really, really hard late game, but you can make opportunity strikes early. Sardakk N'Orr is absolutely the opposite. Flip it on its head. And you also can't obviously completely sprint for tech objectives. You just are hoping the tech rolls out at a decent pace, and then eventually you're able to get them, which means the only thing left to focus on right there at the beginning of the game is economic objectives. Spend 8 resources, spend 8 influence, command counters, all the little spendy bits.
We're going to go after those. They're peaceful. Hopefully they're attainable. We're basically just going to go after the easiest objectives we can without losing any plastic. I think my goal with any Sardakk game is to get to the mid game without having lost a single... Oh, that would just be great. To never have any fights, basically, until it's time... Until we built our engine and we're ready to just do it. We're ready to go for it. So skip the more difficult ones. Go for the easy ones. Hopefully the tech ones won't come out until about the mid game when we can score those, but keep those in mind and try and take tech. I mean, hey, take tech twice if you got to. Take it twice in a row if you have to. Burn an early political stability in order to keep tech twice in a row.
Absolutely.
Early game. Like,
that is my favorite play as Sardakk N'Orr. Is like political stability is the one that's going to get sabotaged in the late game if you're keeping Imperial for the win, right? Someone's going to burn the sabotage on that. But if you're just Sardakk N'Orr in round 2 looking to keep tech for round 3, everyone at the table goes, yeah, he's Sardakk N'Orr. It's fine. Forget about it. Let them have it. And then you just banked 2 rounds worth of getting tech. Double teching. That's amazing.
Right.
You are focusing on a strategy where you stay centered and grounded, and round 3 and round 4, that's when you start building lots of units. So that going into round 5, time to hit, right? That's what we're looking for. Round 1 and 2 is just sort of like, hold on for dear life. Let's make some money. Let's prepare to build lots of units. Round 3 and 4 is build. And then round 5 into round 6 is go get the control objectives now that it's your last chance to do so.
Yeah, and possibly even, I mean, we should talk about Mechatol Rex now, because what's interesting about Sardakk N'Orr is, I am pretty firm on we are not taking Mechatol Rex first. We are not getting the custodian point. I'm sorry, there's going to be somebody that's going to write a thing saying, no, you need that point or whatever. I just can't imagine how it would be a good idea frequently. You know what I mean? It would have to be a crazy situation. But what we are set up really nicely to do is we are like a really solid uprooter that's like good at ground combat. We are, if you have played this correctly up until now, hopefully if we have exos by like round 5 or round 6, we could probably make a play for Mechatol in the late game. And that's probably how we catch up on all those points we did not get in the early game because we have such a bad start. Right?
You want a really solid swing round, and it's great if that swing round can include Mechatol Rex. If you're round 2 and 3 drawing a couple extra secret objectives so that in round 4 you take Imperial, you take Mechatol Rex, score a point off of that, score 2 stage 1s of like the tech ones you've been waiting on or whatever. That's 3 points in round 4 to bring yourself back up. You might feel like in round 2 or 3 that you're falling behind the pack, but if you get that round 4 Imperial or whatever it is, that can bring you right back into the fray. And it's too late in the game for people to really now dive on you and Mechatol. Someone might be the person that makes a last play, but the person that most often gets jumped on a Mechatol is the first person to take it. If you're the second one to take it, sometimes it's no longer worth the investment to go get it from you, especially if you have 3 upgraded Sardakk infantry or 3 infantry and an exo trireme 2 above it where they have to send way too many ships to just be able to take out that fleet at all. It's incredibly, you're really good at hitting somewhere hard and then staying there and locking it down after you've taken it in the late game.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I just want to re-emphasize, because I said uprooter before, and I realized some people maybe haven't kept up with that term.
Oh, right.
Because of Exo Trireme's awesome bombardment, which we don't even need plasma scoring for it to be very good, we have a lot of potential to uproot even like an Arborek if we catch them at the right time, a Soul, like those people that like take Mechatol and just sit on it and they have it now. We are scary to those people. In the late game, if we've done this all correctly, if we've gotten our engine going, we can be that. Now, we can't if we don't, if we don't focus on our economy, if we focus on control objectives first and we stretch ourselves way too out, like it's just not going to happen this way. So you have to play really careful early on, and then once we get into the late game, then things can really start to change, basically.
Yeah. The one thing we kind of left on the table, Hunter, you were talking about this, but give me more of that idea of being the friend of the enemy of the table, because this is when this really starts to come into play here.
Oh, sure. So the idea of being a friend of the enemy of the table is that your priority when it comes to trade is so important that I would be willing to trade with the devil, basically. If there is someone at the table that's just like, everyone is like, no, we are way too scared of that player, nobody wants to trade with them anymore, that's a perfect situation for you. Because what we are recommending is that you trade a lot, but you just don't have any natural, you have no natural leverage over anybody. Yeah. So that is a situation where you do actually get this weird kind of leverage. And I did experience a really awesome game where I had leverage over a Joel Nar player that nobody else wanted to trade with. And I was just like, yep, gonna be your little buddy, gonna help you do everything. And my trade game was completely insane.
Yeah.
And it made the late game a lot easier. Because, I mean, once you get to the late game, if you have this tech, this economy, it's crazy how dangerous you are, basically.
Yeah.
Everything flips.
You can be, that person can be your neighbor. The N'Orr can be your neighbor, and you're boosting them and boosting them and boosting them. But if you're getting enough out of it on your end, you can be the one to crush that leader. You can go stop them in the late game and prevent them from winning and earn yourself a win. Like that is actually a pretty plausible scenario for Sardakk to be in, where it's like, Sardakk, quit feeding N'Orr. They're gonna win like this round. And you're like, okay, that's fine, because now that I've made lots of money off of them and built all these awesome ships, I'm gonna go dunk on his home system, and there's like nothing he can do to stop me.
Right.
That is sort of your big thing. Let's talk about this late game, this set phasers to kill mode, and all of the things that are coming into play to make that possible. We've covered all the mid game things that lead to this point, but what are the actual like tactical plays we're making in the late game to pull off these maneuvers? We're trying to use XO2s. We're using the N'Orr, our flagship, maybe either as defensively, or maybe it is going out there to go take that one last planet or whatever. But Hunter, what do your late games, your final rounds look like as Sardakk N'Orr?
So it's a lot of, I'm going to use this opportunity actually kind of summarize our entire game as far as early into mid into late. This is essentially what I feel like an ideal Sardakk plastic and position is going to look like. So we get to Fighter 2. We spread the fighters out to gum up the works because this is an early game and we're not very strong. We get Carrier 2. Those fighters kind of coalesce back around carriers, and now we have like fighter swarms with maybe like a dreadnought or two out there. We get XO2s. We throw some more dreadnoughts out there. We've got a couple dreadnoughts forward, either taking Mechatol or taking some very high-risk control objectives. I haven't mentioned that because we're so good at bombardment, we're really good at not turn their fleets to dust, the bombard the last ground force one.
Sure, that one.
I like to mention the objectives that are easy for Sardakk because so many of them are hard. And essentially, what we're looking at is a faction that has a really easy time reinforcing their home system once they like kind of have everything locked down. We're talking fighter swarms to soak hits. We're talking XO2s to just straight up destroy their fleets. We don't even have to win, really. You know what I mean? We don't have to hold positions anymore. We just have to destroy the fleets that are coming to take our home system from us. The flagship is interesting because I think it is just kind of like a weird option up in the air. I don't feel like it is solid enough to throw it out and it be forward that often because, like, let's say, I don't know, an Xcho's flagship with Graviton. Well, now our fighter swarms are not helping. There's also the L1 flagship to consider, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So just be a little bit careful with the flagship, but I think defensively it's freaking awesome. It just sitting there above your home system with a bunch of fighters, that is such a solid defense.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even, it's pretty cheap too.
Right.
Bunch of fighters.
You can have it and 6 fighters above it and have a really almost unstoppable fleet sitting there.
Right.
What I like, something you did in one game, and this is just the thing to consider, is you had warfare in like a round 5 scenario or something like that, and you built the flagship in the round you were going to use it.
Yeah.
Things like that are pretty, if you've set up this grav drive, all these things, you're able to pull off those kind of maneuvers, and that's the stuff you're looking for. You're looking for one round where you get really fancy, 1 or 2 rounds.
Right.
It's all about economic, then tech, then control to finish out the game with a wonderfully secured home system that nobody else can go get in the way of.
Right.
Really restricted tech game, blue, green, maybe a Sarween to get extra trireme 2s, and that's it. The tightest game of Twilight Imperium you've ever played, the tightest and safest game you can imagine is how you pull out a victory with Sardakk N'Orr.
Yeah. And I will say this, a lot of this strategy guide was inspired by Schroeder's semifinal game in our first Patreon tournament, which is, if you want to watch that, we could actually throw a link in the description, but also, if you're just looking around our YouTube page, it is the first game of the semifinals. It's game number 1. And Schroeder does, I rewatched it for this episode. He doesn't even quite play it. It's not like he was playing to this guide. I mean, obviously the guide just exists now. But what I mean is that he even does things that I don't necessarily agree with 100%, but just the style of it, I feel like works so much better for Sardakk N'Orr than so many of the other things that I've seen. Coupled with, I think it's just become very standard for Sardakk N'Orr to have to take tech and do double tech at least once or twice. Those are the things that I've seen other people do that led to them winning the game. And honestly, I basically executed this strategy a couple times exactly the way that I've laid it out. And I won 2 games in a row, which was great. One of them was a really wild, kind of maybe worthy of an asterisk win. But it served me well. And I would say playing Sardakk N'Orr this way also was just like enjoyable, more fun than it was playing. I don't know, trying to just focus on plastic. I feel like can be so sad because you're playing risky with a faction that gets really punished when they take risks.
Yeah. I think that is the biggest thing. Is this is not a Matt kind of faction. I am super risk prone. I love doing things and going for the hardest objectives first. And I'm looking forward to playing a Sardakk game where I force myself to go with your mentality here, Hunter, because I think it's going to be a good training wheels game for me to understand like how the other kind of pacing works, because it's something that I don't employ enough, and this is the world where you can actually do that. But like we said at the beginning of the guide, most players, when they first pick up Sardakk N'Orr in their first game or whatever, they think this is the warmonger faction. I got to go be mean with it, and it's not about that. It's about punching hard in the late game.
Right.
And I've seen you win with it. I mean, twice so far. So it's not necessarily wrong. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But let's talk about where we could be off the mark. Let's do some. We did pre-errata, which is where we send out the requests for everyone to talk about the faction ahead of time, so we can get ideas contrary to our own. There's obviously a really big glaring area of our guide, and Jasper took the time to talk a little bit more about Valkyrie Particle Weave, and it's a bit stat driven, so be prepared to listen to a bunch of numbers. But I'm gonna try to read through this because I think it paints a really good picture of what Valkyrie Particle Weave can do, and why, like I said earlier, for at least a 14-point game, I actually do think it can be a really fun way to pull off a late game. I believe Valkyrie Particle Weave is one of the best techs in the game that is almost never used. For obvious reasons, of course, one of them being called Mage and Defense Grid, and the other being Starting Technologies None. The strange thing about Valkyrie Particle Weave is that it acts a lot like a unit tech would. It makes your combat abilities better, but it takes up a space in the red tech path instead. Let's see how effective it is by running the battle calculator in a scenario where you're facing what he calls a Yin Party Bus, a carrier with 4 upgraded infantry to invade your planets and then 2 influence to turn it. So basically Yin invading with 5 infantry. The test here is to see how many ground forces you would need before indoctrination to make it an even fight. So I'm just going to run through their numbers. With all factions, you would need 7 infantry 1 to withstand the attack of 4 incoming Yin infantry. For any faction with the Spec Ops or Sardakk, you need 6 for just like standard Sardakk N'Orr or Soul upgraded factions. If you've got your infantry upgraded, you actually still need 6. You just have slightly better odds, but it doesn't turn it into needing only 5 to make it above 50% chance, basically. Anybody with a PDS and Magen on the planet only needs 5 infantry 1, but Sardakk, just with Valkyrie Particle Weave alone and infantry 1, only needs 5. So you are better than any Soul infantry, any faction with PDS and Mage and Defense Grid. You by far have the most defensive planets out of anyone. If you somehow could luck into Valkyrie Particle Weave and infantry 2, you would, by a pretty ridiculous landslide, have the best infantry in the game. It's incredibly defensive and incredibly good. So we don't want to balk at that. It's just like Jasper even points out, starting with no tech and having to go through Mage and Defense Grid is a huge turnoff to that being viable. Not to mention, we actually don't really want to use red tech skips to go this way. But I'm glad Jasper was kind of able to showcase what Valkyrie Particle Weave is actually capable of, because almost nobody gets it, so you just never get to see it in action.
Yeah, this is great pre-errata, because actually, I mean, I don't disagree with anything he's saying at all. In fact, he's giving us a lot of really solid stats. But yeah, it's just like, it's not it's not in the tech path. That's the problem. Is that
you are so restricted to relying on a very, very optimal tech path that you just can't afford to go do fun stuff. You don't get to go do fun stuff with Sardakk N'Orr. You got to do the normal, slow stuff.
Exactly. You can't get fancy. It's like it's green, blue all the way, unless we're in Magic Christmas Land. And we all know in Magic Christmas Land, there are no rules, just right.
Right. This next one is from Vaunt, and I actually don't have like a quote to give from Vaunt. We had a long conversation on the Discord, and I think Vaunt was even teasing the idea of like drafting up a really big write-up. So if anything, if we ever see, Vaunt's ultimate guide to Sardakk, we'll be sure to add it to this podcast episode. We'll be sure to share it because I think Vaunt had some very, very different ideas, although he agrees on a lot of the same sort of rules of Sardakk. That being like tech is, you got to be optimal with tech. You got to think of your kind of somewhat weaker start, although he has an argument for why the start isn't that bad. But I wish I had a more a strong quote from Vaunt, but there's something to Vaunt's idea that you actually could focus on units early, take a slightly wider slice than you normally would, not just like absolutely gutting your opponent. This isn't like a Baron Eletnev that just stomps all over their neighbor or something. This is I take one or both equidistance or something. I get a little bit bold, then I sit back on that, defend hard, and then start trading really heavily in the mid game. I say, yes, I'm taking the equidistant, but hey, now let's be buddies. I think this is a strategy that is funny that it's coming from Vaunt, because that is kind of Vaunt's whole thing, is like very, very diplomatic. I, as a player, could not pull this off. I know that this wouldn't work because I can't take an equidistant and keep a friend. That's not how a game works for me. Vaunt is the type of player who could, make some sort of case for that happening and then have a perfectly good trade partner on the other side of it. When I go take Aranam Mir and the equidistant, we're doomed. Our relationship is over, and everything is now you pointing your guns at me, which is why we don't want to go for that kind of stuff. So Vaunt, I'm sorry I don't have like a perfect thing to kind of encapsulate the way you're saying it. I know you were trying to accomplish saying a lot, and so we definitely look forward to, and I encourage you to definitely write all that down and give us your notes.
Yes, please do that, actually. Like I would love, I think one of my favorite things about doing the guides is getting the like other takes, the second takes. And this is a very specific guide. This is not like a open loosey-goosey guide, because I feel like it's not an open loosey-goosey faction. But if Vaunt has another path, I would love to hear it. I will say this, because I want to respond to it a little bit.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like we're talking about accomplishing too many things.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like with Sardakk N'Orr is the way I've experienced has been like, okay, we can't do everything at once. So essentially this guide was me saying like, here's kind of the order I want to think about doing it, basically.
Right. Well, and I think the big thing too to note is Vaunt was a finalist in the 2019 Patreon tournament. He's an incredibly good player. Maybe he can pull off really bold maneuvers. We're trying to write this guide as a more toned down, like any new player could pick this up. I don't think any new player could pick up Vaunt's strategy and do well with it. Sure. That's not to say Vaunt's strategy doesn't work. It's just that you have to be a player like Vaunt to be able to do it. And we're trying to make a guide that is a little bit more approachable to anybody to get their feet wet, to get started.
For sure.
As you learn more about Sardakk, you're going to figure out when you can make bold maneuvers. But hopefully this acts as just a good starting point.
Yeah, and if you want to see what we're talking about, you can always just watch the Patreon finals again. Like if you want to watch the Patreon tournament finals, I mean, I can't remember any moments off the top of my head, but Vaunt does some pretty wild stuff in that. Yeah. Isn't it? It's Vaunt that kind of goes from like
Vaunt almost wins.
Yeah,
Vaunt is one dice roll away from winning the finals. Yeah. In that game. Spoilers? Yeah. I don't know. Whatever.
Wow.
we're
you should have seen
that.
it. Yeah, come on. You should have seen it by now. Or if you haven't seen it, maybe that's the thing that finally gets you to see it, is you heard a spoiler.
That's how spoilers work, right?
Yeah, I think that's how it works. So let's talk about PAX Unplugged. I guess we kind of opened with it, right? Yeah, we kind
of opened with it, but let's reiterate. We're going to be there, and we want to see you there. Come and chat with us. we're going to try to make our way to the finals, wherever those are happening. I don't even actually know. Should have prepped that, but somewhere at PAX Unplugged, you can definitely search it. I know you can search it on the PAX Unplugged website. When you search for events, it pops right up if you search Twilight Imperium. We're going to go check it out. We want to talk to people there. We want to see you. We are not specifically doing coverage of it, though. Who knows, though? Maybe we'll do like an episode about it after. I don't know. We are like completely leaving everything up in thin air in terms of what we want to do and get out of PAX Unplugged. So
yes. Let's do we want to do the rundown?
I want to do the rundown.
Yeah, do it.
So how about you rate us on your podcast app of choice? These guides are kind of our biggest bread and butter, but we do all kinds of other stuff. And if you like the TI stuff or you like the Dune stuff that we do, please give us a 5-star rating and, talk good about us. You can also find us on Twitter at SpaceCatsPod. We give game updates. You probably saw multiple updates this week about how late this episode was on our Twitter. That's a place to keep updated with when things are going wrong. Facebook, you can find announcements, things like that. You can also message us on Facebook Messenger at the Space Cats site, and I will typically be there to answer rules questions or just weird little things like that. You can find us on Twitch and YouTube. Hunter is like kind of more or less streaming full-time-ish at this point, and you're working on streams Saturdays, Sundays. You've got one this Sunday, right?
So I have one for this Sunday with some newer players. I've kind of set up a little dojo, and I'm teaching I'm teaching some of the people that are going to be playing in this coming tournament how to be like comfortable playing Twilight Imperium in TTS, and also just getting them a little used to the tournament. So it'll be another tournament mock game. I guarantee you we'll stream it. I won't guarantee that it will end up on the YouTube. We'll see how it goes. I have a lot of games just kind of sitting in a file right now that I could upload to YouTube, that I can just kind of pick and choose and decide which one I want to edit and throw out. But I would expect another stream, another YouTube video next week, and possibly some weird streams throughout the week. I actually meant to do a lot of that this week, but I did not end up doing any of it, basically. There was a thing that happened that I can't talk about yet, that I just realized I can't talk about it until I won't even be able to talk about it next week. It'll be literally be
stuff. Cool stuff got in the way, and someday we'll get to talk about it.
Very cool.
So look forward to that. Hey, meanwhile, you can talk to us on our Board Game Geek Guild. That's boardgamegeek.com/guild/31033. We're trying to boost that up a little bit more. It's getting there. We'll see. Hey, join our Patreon. That's how everyone got into the tournament that we're going to be covering next year. I don't know if we need to do a little bit of a update on like the tournament. There's a lot of people that signed up after the fact that we haven't sent invites to, because those invites have now basically become automatically go to the wait list. So I think we do still need to do one last wave of that, and then we're cutting it off. And I want to be really clear that the people that are getting in this last wave, it's not especially likely that you're high enough on the wait list to get there.
For sure.
We've gotten a decent amount of people already on the wait list. I won't call it impossible because I have no idea what 216 people who signed up for a tournament in October. I don't know what that looks like in January for some people. Yeah. We had drops last year. We'll see, but I just don't want to guarantee anyone anything. But we're moving into tournament season at the end of the year, and things like that, things like our Galactic Council votes on episodes, Space Kitty episodes, lots of ways to interact with our content through our Patreon. You can also interact with us on our Discord for just some fun conversations. That's also where you can get a few of your Patreon benefits.
I want to throw something out when it comes to tournament signups. Do we think for cutoff, you think next Tuesday? Does that sound fair? But
yeah,
basically,
I think
next
so.
time you hear from us, that'll be the cutoff.
Yeah, which is November 26th. That's it. If you're not in before November 26th, we're drawing the line there.
Yeah.
And even then, it's not like you're in a great position on the waiting list to get in there. It's a little man, did that fill up fast. That was like the biggest surprise of my year.
It will be different next time. Because we just did not realize that many people were just waiting in the wings, ready to get in on it. I'll say if you feel like rolling the dice at this point, I mean it's just $1, really. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's all you're throwing at it to see if you can get in. But yeah, we do have quite a few on the overflow at this point. My name's Hunter, and I'm a comedian. And the thing that I can't talk about is comedy related, and I'm very excited about it. And it will actually you will, if you pay attention to our social media and stuff, you will see it next Wednesday is when it comes out, when the kind of embargo on it is going to be lifted, but I'm forbidden to speak of it until then. It's not, it's pretty cool. It means more to me than it will probably mean to you. You'll be like, wait, why is that such a big deal? Why was there an embargo on that? But anyways, I'm a comedian. I do comedy in Portland, Oregon, and I've got a really good show that I got to tell you about. One of my best friends in comedy, Alex Falcone, is having a going away show on Sunday, which is just a couple days from now. And it's at the Helium Comedy Club, and it is on Sunday, November 24th at 7 p.m. Tickets are $12, and there's still a few left. The sales have gone pretty good, which is to say, if you've never seen me do comedy live before and you live in Portland or you're going to be in Portland this weekend, this would be a good opportunity. This is not going to be like some silly little show. This is going to be like a good, solid, great show. And then for the final weekend of November, I am going to be doing the Ha Ha Harvest Festival, which is a super cool Portland-based festival. I've got a couple shows to throw at you real quick. The day passes for the Ha Ha Harvest Festival are $29, and the festival pass is $49. Here are my shows, though. For Friday, November 29th, I'm going to be on 2 shows. One is called Comedy Cornucopia, which is the one that I'm hosting. That is like just me and a bunch of really professional, awesome comedians. That one is super cool. That is at Siren Theater. And that show starts at 6 o'clock. The other one is called Synchronous with Me, which is a very weird synchronicity walk thing where we basically walk through the city and we roll dice and it tells us to do things. It's a very weird show, super cool. That show is at Kelly's Olympian and it starts at 10 o'clock. Those are both Friday, November 29th shows. Saturday shows, I'm going to be there back at Kelly's with Dumb and Busted, my true crime comedy podcast that I also do. And that show starts at 4 o'clock. At Kelly's, Dumb and Busted, super cool show. And I'm going to be back on a podcast I've been on a couple times, once with Matt, called Spec Script, that is also at Kelly's. That show starts at 8:30. Both of those shows are on Saturday, November 30th. And final show on Sunday, Forgotten Fantasies, which is a show where we basically just watch old forgotten media, weird TV shows that people barely remember. Beetleborgs. I might do a Beetleborgs thing. Do you guys remember Beetleborgs? Do you remember how Beetleborgs had that guy in charge that just looked like Jay Leno, but he was blue? He was like Jay Leno plus the blue meanie. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I've never watched Beetleborgs.
Beetleborgs is great, and
I was a Street Sharks guy.
I'm gonna try it. Yeah, see, Street Sharks would be another good one for Forgotten Fantasies. But yeah, that's a really cool show, and that's on Sunday, December 1st, 8 o'clock. At Kelly's Olympian. Those are my shows. Whew.
So our time sphere just jumped ahead 3 minutes, but the listener experienced no time.
Yeah.
And in that time, you did some really weird stuff and said some really weird stuff. And I had to cut it all out in post. And now we're in this weird time flux.
I'm sorry,
I'm
Matt.
Drifting away.
I'm sorry, Matt. I messed up.
And I'm falling.
I messed up. Anyways, we're in the time skip now. Just to let everyone know here at the end, this is my first recording of the day of 7 recordings that I'm doing today. So, without further, goodbye. You know what? Not we're going to find some bit and go out on a high note. Nope. Gotta go. Here's the equivalent of me basically hanging the phone up on you, the listener, right now. Click.
Thank you for listening to Space Cat's Peace Turtles, and thanks to Ben Prunty for the use of his music. You can find more at benpruntymusic.com and benprunty.bandcamp.com. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.